Hi, welcome.
Welcome. Oh,
You're
hi.
on. Yeah, you got a little dog head here.
Hello, sweetheart.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Do you want to give us a little introduction of who you are and what you do and the magic you share?
The magic. Well, I'm Tara Caffelle. I'm a coach and a writer, and that's what I am. I do lots of different things within that, but my main focus is on grief and especially the grief in our workspaces, in our home spaces, and sort of where it intersects with our relationships.
Yeah,
Yeah,
perfect.
that's what I do. Yeah.
And how did you get started in this work?
Well, I began as a coach 2008, and then there was just a trajectory and a flow of becoming who I am now. I feel like it's a culmination of all of those things. But yeah, I started my coach training in 2008. Worked on empowerment and did all those great things, and then through a series of life events and losses, kind of found my way to grief and the power that lies within it, and how if we can harness that universal experience, how it can be so big for all of us. And it just kind of led me and drew me to working where I work now.
And when you kind of started expressing that or working in that realm, did you know that that was your life purpose at that point, or has it been sort of a afterthought?
It felt really organic at the time. Like, I went through a bunch of loss in 2015, so I was kind of taking what I already knew and then just finding my way, like trudging through frozen peanut butter to through it, to heal myself, to try and find a way through. That's all I was trying to do. And then as I did that, I started writing about it, and I started speaking about it, and I started to go, what is wrong with this process and how people are treated? And it called me to, we need to be better at this. And so I just kind of went where it always felt good and powerful. And I started to notice that it felt like divinity was speaking through me. And that's when I knew, oh yeah, my voice is changing and I feel sort of bolstered and powerful, right? Like there's a rod going through me. So I found that almost by accident, but here I am.
Yeah, and it's perfect for you, and you do such a great job of holding space for everyone within the grief community. So we'll share your group and some teasers to your work after this for sure.
Great.
Um, so what are you using this? I mean, you have lots of big things coming up, so outside of the work realm. But what do you want to talk about? Some of the new beginnings that are both happening during this isolation time and also just coincidentally in your life and upcoming excitement for you?
Yeah, there's a few things happening. So my husband and I have been on the road to adoption for about a year and a half, almost 2 years actually. And we've been matched with a magical little being who is just on the planet since December. We never expected a new little baby. But because of all this isolation, he's in a foster home. We are in our home. We are not together, which is heartbreaking every single day. And you realize um how out of power we are. We don't get to decide any of this. And so it's a really big exercise in surrender and gratitude, and also just being really sad and heavy with it. So when that's not happening, and I feel like I have to look for, okay, why is he not here? Why am I being given this time? And in the last week or so, I've sort of figured out, like, I landed on a business place of working with, I call it grief at work. So it's working with corporations, sort of as a management consultant, to how can we be better humans to our employees? And I can see this happening in the isolation that, it's hard for employers, and some of them are failing at not serving their employees very well, or their communities. And sometimes you're alienating your employees when everything comes back together. So it really became obvious that the world is going through grief, and so are our businesses, and they are having to evolve and change, and they don't necessarily know what that's about. So I'm really focusing on serving those entrepreneurs and business owners to step into the opportunity of what is happening right now and how we might be better, and how we may be agile and shift as the world comes back together.
And,
Hopefully it does, right? but
and in
but how do
response
we be
to grief
different?
from this incident in particular, or grief of
Yeah.
all types in the workplace, or what?
Well, I was originally focused on grief of all types because, sure, we have someone in our lives die and we have to go back to work, but we also have, miscarriages and divorces and retirement. We have all sorts of things that happen in our lives, and grief doesn't care. We have to take it to work with us. And what if it got to be at the boardroom table to say, I'm really struggling today. Here's what I need from this team. Okay, cool. You get to have that. And on with the meeting we go, right?
Yeah.
Like, what if it just lived at the table? And so I think this is such a baptism, this isolation and these closing down of businesses, to really look at how we are with grief and how we are with trauma and how we can love our employees and create service for them in order to be part of our team.
And is that something that you see kind of integrating with the work that you do with your groups and your
Mm-hmm. Definitely. So I actually have a few books kind of in my head that are right now just outlines,
yeah
but they are about grief at work and what grief looks like as an expression, like different, like if you take a husband and wife who experience loss, like say one of their parents dies, and they come into the aftermath of that with their children in their home, navigating that in whatever the way they will, and it will show up in different ways. One of them might drink a lot or shop a lot or find some expression there, and another one might be like, let's buy a chicken farm and move out of the city. Like, those are two very different reactions.
sure.
But when grief moves into our homes with us, it really can wreak a crazy narrative on our families and our relationships unless we're sort of aware of what's happening and can recognize it. So there's lots of expressions of this grief care that's going out into the world. I think work is one of the obvious ones because we spend so much time there, and
Yeah.
it is an expression of how we show up in the world and how we make money and what imprint we have. So it feels like a really obvious place to go.
Yeah, I think it's perfect. And I think any of us who have experienced serious grief having to go to work and kind of ultimately fake it and put
Oh
on a
yeah.
happy face because there's no safe place to be expressed in that realm it's a curse in a lot of ways, just of the system, and we've all been there, and it's brutal.
Yeah. Well, and even to look at bereavement leave within a corporation, they give you like 5 days to go be at the funeral. And then by then you're supposed to be over it.
Yeah.
We're supposed to move on, and I need my sales report and let's go. And what? And here's the thing is, if we don't pay attention to this grief, like if we get divorced and nothing happens and we just kind of slog through, we often lose our jobs eventually because we disengage and
Yeah.
we don't care and we become toxic and we just spread our crap everywhere. And instead, if we had the tools to deal with it, if we knew what it was, we go, oh yeah, this is grief. Let's just assume it's grief and give some support and keep working, however that looks.
Yeah, certainly. I think that would be a huge gift to so many, and I definitely wish I had had that opportunity in
Oh, me
past
too. I
life.
remember sitting at a desk in my office when I was going through my divorce, and I would have the door open because I was dead. And I would just, throughout the door, I would cry, or out the day, I would cry. And I remember the warehouse guy came in and he didn't know what to do with me because I was weeping at my desk. And I said, it's okay, I'm fine. Just give me the papers and
Yeah,
sign what I need to. But like, I think it probably made him feel unsafe and didn't know what was happening with me. And could he count on me to do my job? And it trickles through even to contractors we might work with who are in contact with us and don't know what's happening or why we're suddenly not showing up the way we were.
sure.
Yeah, I wish I'd had this many, many times throughout my life. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a beautiful way to kind of bridge those worlds for people as employees, as employers, for all of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and just being compassionate for each other to, I know of a workspace where everybody was continuing to work as folks were isolating. And one of the sort of younger guys pointed out that one of the really much older employees who probably should retire at some point, um, was feeling a lot of fear and making a lot of rules, like had signs, don't come into my office, don't come near me, don't touch this. And so this younger guy said, it feels like this guy might be a lot more comfortable if we could find another arrangement for him. It feels like he's not feeling safe near us, and maybe we could look at that. And so now this older guy is working from home in a very kind of adapted way, which is working for everyone, and everyone feels safe. So it just, I think it encourages everybody and the whole team to look out for one another.
Yeah.
And to say, this looks hard on this person and I don't need to know what it's about, but I want support for that teammate of mine.
Yeah, and I experienced a lot of that in management and ownership and leadership roles, or whatever it is, with employees too, and just welcoming the situation for them to come and share what's going on with them in a way that allows you to hold space for them,
Yeah.
instead of just wondering, like why they're having a breakdown, or
Yeah.
or they're particularly short or emotional, or they're calling off, or whatever it is. And I've been on both sides of that, but it's a delicate balance, and you have to kind of have some sort of program or policy or understanding of that in advance, to make sure that everybody gets treated fairly with that, because it depends on what's happening in the world, in the workplace at that point. This is a
Absolutely.
particularly strange time, of course, so it's hard to even conceptualize what that looks
Yeah.
like in a couple of
It's
months.
like
But
hyper elevated right now, all of
yeah,
it. And well, and it's showing us all, where our gaps and overlaps are in our
yeah.
businesses and in how we work with our people and how we communicate. It's the gaps are getting highlighted as if with a neon sign.
And
So
even more
right on.
so when we return.
Yeah.
Everything will be different.
Everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what's your absolute favorite part of what you do?
Hmm. I think it's getting to notice how beautiful being a human is. Like when I'm with someone and they're telling me this grief story of what happened to their loved one or them or whatever the story is, I get to drop into it, and there's certainly a vulnerable part where I go, oh, like I don't know what to say, and I'm so sorry that happened to you, but I joined them. And and it's, I don't know, I kind of like this stuff where we get to look where our shame lies and where we feel inadequate, and it's the great equalizer. We will all have this experience of loss, we will all have beginnings and endings, that's just the rule. And so it makes me feel really beautifully human to be with someone in that moment and just see them. And yeah, I can't fix it and I wish I could, and I'm sorry. I'm just sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think
Hmm.
that's a really that is a unique, it's a unique role and also capability that not very many people are able to provide for others. And so I think that's what's so sweet about the work that you do, is that you hold that space for people in a way that many of them have never experienced in their whole lives.
Yeah.
Not in a family dynamic, not in a coach or therapist dynamic, certainly not at work, probably not with their partner.
Right. Well, I was speaking with my husband last weekend. We have this giant picture window, and birds constantly plow into it really hard.
Yeah.
I tried and saved them. And so as soon as it happens, I bolt outside, often in my pajamas, to pick up this bird. I call it my hospice because they're
Oh,
going to die and they need someone to witness that. And so I hold them and I talk to them and I tell them it's okay to go and go find the light or whatever. But it's almost how I think about conversations that are kind of difficult and uncomfortable. Like I run into them when other people are like, get me away. But I kind of run into the burning buildings of our conversations because I can. You're right. It's not something that everybody has, and not something everybody's comfortable with figuring out how to be with. But Yeah, it's a, I think, a gift that way. And I love it. I welcome it. It's fine.
I love watching it from afar.
Yeah.
Having worked with you, it translates in all your work that you share publicly. So,
Thank you. Thank you.
if you were to describe the work that you do, or how you feel about it, what would be 3 words that would embody that?
3 words. Oh, life through grief, because it ultimately sets us free.
Yeah,
So if we can learn to live in our grief, we find a whole new part of life. We really do.
yeah, perfect.
Mm.
I do want to mention one thing. One of the favorite things that I learned from you is make a different fucking choice.
I love that. Yes.
I use that with virtually every client I've ever had since meeting you. So I have no regret on that, and people will recognize that when I mention
Yeah.
it. But it's my absolute favorite. It's on my wall of inspiration, and
I love it.
I bring it up in every single workshop. So I always think of you, and when I say that, and I think it's consistently one of my best advice moments to give.
We always have a choice to make a different choice.
Yeah.
Not necessarily with the circumstances, but with how we approach them and how we think about it. And
Sure.
oh, I love that that's on your wall. That's great.
Yeah. A little bit of a random segue from the grief conversation, but when I
But
think
it's even true that, often the choice is to white knuckle it, hold on tight, and turn away from the grief. And as soon as people hear the word grief, like, that means funeral, that means somebody died. Like, no, it means something ended. And and if we choose to ask grief what it has for us, it doesn't just keep coming back. It actually says, here's what I have for you.
yeah,
Here's the gift for you. Go with it. So yeah, make a different fucking choice.
yeah, yeah, I love it. I will forever love you for that. Um,
Right.
but on the tone of advice, what other advice do you have for people that are, wanting to pursue their life passion, or have a topic that they feel really resonant with and
Ooh.
want to share with the world?
I think that where we get called doesn't always make sense to us, but remember that you do always make sense. Like if something actually fires you up and has you be shaky and emotional or crying or whatever reaction your body is having, like you are being spoken to by something that is bigger than you. And so if you feel this pull and you can't explain why, then who cares about the why? Just go do it. And also don't worry about the how. Just focus on what.
Yeah,
Like a how kills a what. We don't know we don't have to know how something's going to happen. We just have to know that we want it to, and kind of go where you're pulled, go where you're called, and
all
you
right.
make sense.
Got a yapper. Let me pause you for 1 second.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Sorry about that. So when it comes to this whole what you're called to do, if you knew you would be supported for anything,
Mm.
dream big, biggest vision possible, what would you do?
Well, I have a vision, and this is what I think about as I fall asleep right now, is I want to feel like Madison Square Garden and talk about grief. That's what I want. Like I want to bring it into our everyday conversations, knowing that it doesn't have to kill the conversation to bring up our losses and our endings. So yeah, I absolutely see a giant stadium of conversation, and and I think I would take my shoes off and I think I would get comfortable and I would talk to the people, and this is how it would be. And I think we would learn that it can be funny, and we're allowed to laugh about our grief, and we're allowed to laugh about our dead people. Like they were funny. They were funny. We're sad they're gone, but gosh, it was funny to have them here.
Yeah.
And all of these emotions get to live together and be together. Um, I think I would love for every company in North America to know what grief at work is, and to have a policy around it, and to have embraced it and know that grief doesn't have to kill your bottom line, but it's definitely a part of your business, and and to be better humans because of it. Yeah, I want it to be a household word, actually.
Yeah. I think
Yeah.
that would serve so many of us if we had had that opportunity, even from a childhood perspective.
Yeah. Think about how much grief our little people have. Like our little tiny humans who are trying to wrap their heads around being on the planet at all, but also, sometimes your toys break or you get disappointed. Like we look at kids right now who don't get to have birthday parties and they miss their teachers and they want to see their friends. And this is all grief, little ones. It
Yeah,
is. And we can't do anything about it, but we can say that must hurt.
sure.
You must miss your friends, right? And
Well, and we have to learn that before we can share it to them. That's the hardest part.
yeah, yeah. I think once we are all fluid in grief, it really changes how we are as humans together,
Yeah.
all the way down the line. Yeah.
What's one thing that needs to shift for you to get out of your own way with what you're trying to create?
Ugh. It's so funny. I, coach people and tell them to make a different fucking choice. And hello.
Yeah, what's the different fucking choice you need to make?
I
Basically, that's
think
what I'm
that
asking.
I still think too small sometimes. And I think that, like, I don't know, I feel like sometimes I'm inconvenient or people don't want to hear what I have to say, or I'm going to be too loud or too overexposed, or so I constantly have to push against that for myself. And somebody told me once that when you feel like you are way too loud and annoying and overexposed, you're making a drop in the bucket. So make sure that you're absolutely over the top, even though it's wildly uncomfortable. And I'm an introvert, so I like to just, I like to hang back. So that's definitely my piece is louder, bigger, brighter, louder, bigger, brighter, and keep going. Yeah.
Perfect. So is that what you see the next step is to find a way to become louder, bigger, brighter? That's what
Yeah.
I'll message you about and ask how that's coming along.
Yes. Yes. Well, and it helps to ground in, like, I don't like being louder, bigger, brighter just for the sake of it. So it really helps me to keep grounding into what am I actually here for? Because that helps me show up in service of whatever it is. And it helps me step over my own little self who's clinging to the skirts and going, I don't want to be visible. Right. It calls me forward and I'm willing to do it. Just like when we have kids, it calls us forward to make phone calls for them and advocate for them. Well, I'm making an advocation for this work I'm doing because it feels so big and it's bigger than me. So I have to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it is a fine line learning how to do that, right? And become visible and
Yeah.
not be intimidated by that or not feel like you're trying to create something bigger than you want or
Yeah.
vision.
And and also getting really, really good at honoring our own boundaries in that, to protect ourselves. Like I am an introvert and I know I have to protect myself in terms of who gets to have time and how much I talk and how much I do. I have to safeguard myself or there'll be nothing left for anyone else. And knowing that has been a game changer actually in the last year is figuring that piece out. Yeah.
Yeah, I can relate to some of that. I'm definitely not the introvert, but I like to say that I'm like a born again introvert at
Uh-huh.
this point in my life because I've also felt a lot like that, and it's about preserving my energy and my space and my you know recentering just requires
Yeah.
different things than it used to, and age changes and life and
Mm-hmm.
grief
Mm-hmm.
and all these different layers. And
Yeah.
what I used to be,
I like that, the born again introvert.
yeah.
I'm adopting that. I like it.
Yeah, I mean, because it's also part of it is just it's a new set of tools and a new set of approach or response for me. And that's changed in so many different ways, just in age and some of that maybe is maturity or life experience or whatever, health, all these
Yeah.
different factors. But it's hard when you want to be outward facing and give, and then also really need a lot of time to
Yeah.
regenerate. There's a really delicate balance there that I definitely haven't perfected.
No, no, I think it takes almost a whole lifetime.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not sure I'll ever nail it fully, but getting closer for every
Yeah,
day.
we get close. We can make
Yeah.
different choices. Yeah.
Um, so do you have any last minute uh, additions that you want to share for people that are experiencing grief on ways to process or tools or techniques? Or, I mean, I know it's like a giant topic to kind of
It is.
flush into a couple minutes, but any
Yeah.
words of wisdom when it comes to grief in particular, especially because so many are experiencing it during this time and, you know, on so many different capacities.
Yeah, yeah. I think the overarching is that we have, billions of people on this planet who are all going through this exact same experience, but we're experiencing it a billion different ways because we all have different circumstances and mental health, and we have, different things happening. And I think the main thing is get through this in any way that you need to. Just take the permission. You make sense. You absolutely make sense. Because grief doesn't look the same ever. And it doesn't look the same from hour to hour. Like if you've ever lost someone, you know that some days you feel like Superwoman or Superman, and some days you feel like gum on the bottom of a shoe. And that can happen within an hour, within a minute. It can just shift constantly. So you make sense. just just know that you make sense. It's okay. It's grief, and it's allowed to look completely nutty.
Perfect.
Yeah.
I love it. Thank you for that wisdom and guidance for all of us. I think the timing is perfect.
Good. Thank you for having me.
It's
This
good
is
to
so
see you.
fun.
I'm excited to see what comes next, and we'll be keeping an eye out for your book launches.
Okay, great. Good to see you,
Good
Nicole.
to see you too.